Today, we're going to go with our top 3 biggest or most important defensive players for the Eagles this upcoming season, man. And at number 3, I look at the cornerback room. And I look at, a top 3, a top 2 duo in the league. Maybe you can make the argument that they're the best cornerback duo in the league. So if either one of these guys goes down, the Eagles have a little bit of an issue. Excuse me. I'm going to go with James Bradberry here, Scotty. And I go with James Bradberry. It's more of a gut feeling for me, okay? Because you know how I feel about Darius Slay. And you and I, 2 years ago, when Eagles fans are ready to kick him to the curb and get out of that contract, you and I were sitting here talking how, he's still a top 10 corner. There were people saying he's not top 10 anymore, which is utterly ridiculous. I think he's an overall better corner than James Bradberry. But for some reason, I feel more comfortable if James Bradberry was on the field for this defense than if Darius Slay were to go down with an injury or something. I think James Bradberry making all-pro second team last year for the Eagles, no one throws his way. And not a lot of people wanted to throw Slay's way either, but no one threw Bradberry's way. There's just Slay brings that excitement. Slay brings that playmaking ability, right? Big play Slay, right? Bradberry just brings that stable, shut down, don't throw my way. And if you are catching the ball, it's for 4 yards and I'm right on your back and hip to make a tackle. So I go with James Bradberry just because I think he's a little bit more stable and consistent in that cornerback room than a Darius Slay is.
Interesting, man. I actually I went with your counterpart there.
Okay.
And I went with Darius Slay. I get everything you're saying about James Bradberry, and ultimately last year he was the all-pro corner in the group. It wasn't Darius Slay. But the reason that I'm picking Darius Slay in this 3 spot, as far as most important or top 3 Eagles on defense, this is, coming off a year where we did release this man and let this man go out into free agency, went and visited with the Ravens apparently. And then we brought him back, right? So there is a little bit of disconnect there for that situation to happen, right? And it's all good now. Everything moves on. We got Matt Patricia and Darius Slay in the same building, and everything's roses and dandelions. So it's interesting, though. This is basically him playing for the rest of his career, right? Like, sure. If he's going to spend the latter part of his career in Philadelphia, he's going to have to perform really well this season. And I think Darius Slay is approaching this area where I don't know if it's an Eagles fan thing. I don't know if it's like a national thing where people look at Darius Slay and they feel like he's on the brink of being washed. Like they feel like he's turning that corner and about to hit that cliff. And there's this part of me that feels like that's just not the case. Like what is making us think that? Like I don't know what that is. The reason I picked Darius Slay over James Bradberry per se is just simply in my mind. I think if Darius Slay was to go down, what is like the trickle down effect of targets at corners, right? And how much more are corners going to have to attack James Bradberry in this case, right? How much does Darius Slay protect James Bradberry in a sense? And you look at the effect that Darius Slay had in tandem with James Bradberry coming from the New York Giants, where James Bradberry didn't have a very good season. And he came in with this group in Philadelphia. Now, mind you, it could be the scheme. It could be, the system itself. It doesn't necessarily pertain to Darius Slay. But I just look at Darius Slay as the true number one corner, even though James Bradberry, he's right there. He's on his heels. I do look at big play Slay as that number one guy. And I just think having him there, his funniness, his goofiness, I think to counteract James Bradberry's seriousness and calmness, the stability. So I think it kind of makes sense that we both picked each corner for this spot, because in reality, they both probably belong on this list, but probably as a tandem, because like you said, if either one of them goes down, it's going to be bad news for this team. So I'm not going to sit here and put James Bradberry down to raise Slay up. I'm not going to do that. I think Slay's primed for, I don't want to say like a bounce back year, because he didn't have like a down year. I just think he's set up for a year where he can still continue to prove haters wrong. And it's sad that he has to do that, but
I
I
agree,
just
man.
like
And
Slay's motivation this year.
to be honest with you, like, it pisses me off. I don't know where that sentiment came from a few years ago, and it kind of still lingers around where he was washed a season or two ago. And dude, if you look around the league at this cornerback list collectively, and you try to tell me that Darius Slay isn't a top 10 corner, I don't know how to have a conversation with you. Look, he's not top 5 right anymore. You might not have him in the top 7. You're gonna tell me he's not 8, 9, or 10 on that list. He's not somewhere around there. I agree with you. I think Darius Slay is a better corner than James Bradberry. This for me is more of just kind of, if one of them was to go down, just gut wise, who do I feel like could help keep this defense stable? And for some reason, I just lean James Bradberry.
Do you look, and I'm only saying this because it came to mind. Do you look at James Bradberry versus Darius Slay as like Darius Slay? He's called big play Slay, so he's gonna take some risks. He's gonna get some turnovers, right? Is he more like that Asante Samuel, good, to great corner? And then you have James Bradberry, who's just that. He's that stable, responsible. He's not going to take a ton of risks. He's just going to do his job.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Darrell Reeves on the other side.
Right. And that's why I think they're such a perfect combination. Yeah. I think they balance each other out so well, because if Slay was cornerback 1 like he was 2-3 years ago, and there wasn't a James Bradberry here for number 2, those risks start to become amplified when the rest of your defense isn't as stout. Listen, it's not even just cornerback 2. When you're talking about the defensive line we have, when you're talking about the linebackers we brought in, the rest of the defense is stacked as well. Phanatics. But I do think that's why they're such a perfect combination, and they do bounce each other out. And that's why I do think Bradberry is slightly, again, he's not better, but slightly more important to the team's success, because he is that calming, stable, body back there that I'm not worried about him getting torched. And I'm not worried about Slay getting torched on an island either. But to your point, there are going to be moments where a 40-yard play is picked up because he might have went for something.
Yeah, because that Cowboys game comes to mind with T.Y. Hilton.
Right, and you could blame that on the safety or whatever for passing him on or not picking him up. But different things happen. Again, it's more of a gut feeling for me.
The one underlying cause or word of reason here, I guess, would be to maybe we're sleeping on the corners behind them, because these corners have been getting hyped up out of training camp so far between Josh Jobe and Kaylee Ringo. These guys are playing pretty well at training camp right now, and frustrating the offense the last 2 days they've been out there. So it's good stuff. Maybe we are not taking that into account as much as we should, but these are top, like you said, this is a top duo of corners in the NFL. Yep. So right now, if one of those guys goes
you
down,
lose one and you lose a piece of that shiny new toy that you kind of just got as a kid, and it doesn't feel the same, right?
Yeah,
the Eagles defense feels special because that tandem's back there, not because one of them's back there, right? At number 2, and this kind of coincides with my number 3 in terms of not being the most talented guy in this room, just being a little bit more important for what he brings to the table, right? And at number 2, I have Jordan Davis. Right, he's not the best defensive tackle on this team. He's not the most important cog on this defensive line. But what he brings to the table versus the other, D tackles and other defensive linemen is the ability to stop and dominate in the run game. And we saw what life was like without our first round pick last year. And he was only a rookie. He feels better. He feels healthier. He feels quicker to the ball, right? He feels more comfortable in the NFL from college. To me, when you see what life was like in the ground game without him on the field last year, you got to go out and bring in Nick Dominican and Linval Joseph just to try to, stop the water from getting in the ship, right? And slow that run game down. When he's off the field, bad things happen. And I know Jalen Carter can do both. And I know Jalen Carter's better at stopping the run than Javon Hargrave was. And Fletcher Cox is all right at it. And Milton Williams, but Jordan Davis is the centerpiece of this defensive line group that is going to be your stable factor in stopping the ground game, which has been an issue for the Eagles defense the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So to me, I have him at number 2 because he brings something to the table that all of the other defensive linemen do not bring.
I like that pick. Once again, it kind of balances out the guy that I'm going to go with at number 2, which is Jalen Carter, the rookie. So, yeah, I love everything you said about Jordan Davis. And I think when you talk about the run game, I mean, yeah, that's more than enough reason, given what we saw last year, to have him on this list. I went with Jalen Carter because he's that new shiny toy that you mentioned.
Yeah.
He's the
You don't
number
want
9
that
pick.
going anywhere, bro.
The number 9 pick in the first round of the draft this year. People talk about him as if he could have been the number 1 pick in the draft. That's how good this kid is. He's 6'3", 314 pounds, coming out of college. That's a big boy. He's getting first team reps right now, man. He's really impressing to the point where he's getting first team reps in training camp so far, which it's very early on right now. I saw a report yesterday from NFL Rookie on Twitter, and it said something of the nature of the guards are now game planning at training camp on how
Fletcher Cox made a comment about it too.
Contain Jalen Carter, and Fletcher Cox has praised Jalen Carter and what he's been able to do, talking about him being one of the best talents at this position that he's seen. Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey have really put this guy on the pedestal.
Dude, he just moves you.
He moves you. And that's what it's going to come down to this year, man. We got a prolific talent in the draft in the first round this year. And Nolan Smith, I'm sure he's going to be great as well. But this guy, Jalen Carter, is a different breed from what we're hearing. And I'm just beyond excited. I don't know if I've been this excited for a defensive tackle since Fletcher Cox got drafted by the Eagles. Like I don't even think I was that excited at that time because I didn't have a grasp of football of that, to be excited about a defensive lineman at that point in my life, maybe. But no, this kid is just creating excitement, and to think of what he can do alongside Jordan Davis, alongside Fletcher Cox, and then all of the edge rushers and other defensive tackles that we have. It's insane to think about what we could have here with this guy and Jordan Davis. This could be your defensive tackles for the next 10 years, man. And that's, you think about the Eagles, what their calling card is, it's the trenches. And that's just huge. It's huge to have that type of foundation in your defensive line to go along with vets like Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox that are still there. So I'm excited for this kid, Jalen Carter. I think he's going to wreak havoc on offensive lines. I think by week 3, something we talked about earlier in the summer on this show, I think by week 3, once he gets his feet down for real, I think he's going to be wreaking havoc in this league. And, 5-6 sacks, I think that's more than realistic. I think he could really surprise us and make a push for Defensive Player of the Year.
If he gets the playing time, 100%, listen, you know how I feel about Jalen Carter. Yeah, I want
of the year. Let me correct myself.
Yeah, I want this kid on the field starting day one. Like I just don't care. I'm sure he won't. I'm sure Cox and Davis will be the first team defensive tackles, and maybe like you said later on in the season that something changes. And with the rotation, I get it. It doesn't really matter who steps on the field first. But to me, dude, when you talk about that prolific talent, like you were just alluding to, that's a game changer. That's a game wrecker, and he needs to be on the field more than the other guys. So maybe he doesn't need to start, but I promise you, when I look at those snap counts at the end of the game that Reuben Frank puts out on Twitter, or someone puts out, right? Jalen Carter better be among the top of the group in the defensive line room, okay? Because when you have a talent that dangerous and that strong and that much of a difference maker, he needs to be on the field. I told you, there's no time and there's no room for training wheels, man. Yeah, we talk all the time about the recent list, and I get it. They're more of edge rushers than interior defensive linemen, but we know what kind of pass rusher he can be. When you talk about the Nick Boses of the world, the Joey Boses, the TJ Watts, the Micah Parsons, what's one thing they have in common, Scotty? They come in day one, are difference makers, and all in the category for Defensive Player of the Year, and sometimes, Rookie Defensive Player of the Year, and sometimes Defensive Player of the Year, their rookie year.
Yeah.
That's what kind of talent I look at when I hear and see Jalen Carter. So I love the. It's not even my pick, and I'm fired up.
You gotta love it, man.
The only reason I went with Jordan Davis is for the reasons I laid out. He does something and excels at something different than the rest of the group does. Yeah. If you lose Jordan Davis, you're kind of in a hole there with the run game. If you lose Jalen Carter, it hurts, but you have many more pass rushers. That's the only reason I gave Jordan Davis the edge there, dude.
I'm so excited that I've contemplated buying his jersey. I that's where I'm at with Jalen Carter. And maybe I'm just buying the hype. I don't know, right? We'll see what he looks like, but I just have this feeling that he's just going to come out and look different than what we've ever seen. Yeah. And in a good way. That's what I'm feeling with Jalen Carter, man. He just seems like a different animal. That's what it feels like.
Because when we're used to seeing a rookie step on the field and just being a rookie, just just learning,
just like a plug-in piece. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When I see him, and to my expectations, we're going to be looking down saying, "Oh shit," but he's a rookie, and he's.
Let me ask you this: what do you think about these Aaron Donald rumors, man?
I mean,
is that ridiculous or what?
Listen, if there's even a shadow of a chance that you can get it done, you obviously do it. And
do all these sites, do all these media companies pick the Eagles for
every
superstar?
I don't know where it came from, available? How true it could be. I've heard rumors that the Rams are looking for a suitor for Stafford to get out of that money and everything. So if they're going in the full rebuild, I guess you could see a deal in place for Aaron Donald. But
I've seen it twice now. Mock trades from different sites talking about Aaron Donald to the Eagles.
Stop.
It's ridiculous, man.
Don't do that.
Miles Jack getting first team reps. I know we talked about linebackers.
Crazy, earlier, man. So. Crazy. We'll get into that in a couple minutes.
I'm getting out of order.
I'm again, that's another thing I'm not used to hearing, and I'm glad to hear it. I feel like in the past, we go out and sign 2 linebackers for depth reasons or whatever the case may be. And it's that's all they're brought in here for. Yeah. Even if they're more talented, they're just here for depth signings and they're playing with the second and third team. No, we need help. He's going to help from day one, supposedly. At number 1, I know I just said I picked Jordan Davis over Jalen Carter because we had more pass rushes, but I had this dude on my top 5 most important Eagles, both sides of the ball, high up on that list. I have to go with Hassan Reddick. Again, I know they have more pass rushers like I alluded to with Jalen Carter, but this is the pass rusher. This is the guy, the motor that leads this defense and leads that unit. And if he's not playing up to standard, if he gets injured, if something goes south with Hassan Reddick this season, the Eagles pass rush takes a significant hit, man. I know they have lots of bodies that can fill, and they'll still be talented. They'll still be a great unit. They're a different kind of unit with him. They're a 70-plus sack kind of unit because of him. Hassan Reddick is my number 1 most important defensive player for the Eagles.
Yeah, I actually I went with Hassan Reddick as well here, man. I thought it was a kind of a no-brainer when it comes to defense. And I know kind of conflicts with my overall 5 selected Eagles last week. Because I know I ended up going with I think Avonte Maddox.
Yeah, but that's for a different reason. I feel
a little bit different, right? A little bit different. It's more of a replacement factor in that sense. Hassan Reddick, when we're talking about defensive players and defensive players on this unit, he's the best player on this defensive unit right now. Now there's room for Jalen Carter to step in and maybe claim that over the next 2 years, but right now Hassan Reddick is that guy. He's the engine. And when you look around leagues, right, you look at the Cowboys, the 49ers, these different teams that have these prolific defenses, they all have superior edge rushers, right? They have top 5 edge rushers, and that's what Hassan Reddick is, man. He is up there with the likes of Micah Parsons, the Bosa twins, right? That caliber of defensive edge rusher. I don't want to put him in with TJ Watt just yet. TJ Watt's a little bit of a different animal, but he's in that category nonetheless, production wise. And whenever you're talking about that, that's when you have to give some respect to this guy. He's the engine behind this team, because if you don't have him rushing on the outside, like you said, there's quality replacements, but there's just a different X factor with Hassan Reddick in the quickness that he gets to the quarterback. There's a quickness to it, right? It's not just your regular sack. It's your sack within 3 seconds of having the ball snapped. And that makes a huge difference when it comes to the amount of sacks that he gets, the forced fumbles that he gets. I think he had, 5 forced fumbles last year, 3 fumble recoveries.
Remember the Jacksonville game?
Yeah, exactly, man. He's
2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery.
Fumble and then getting the fumble itself, right? Recovering the fumble himself. Yeah. And then you talk about 16 sacks in the regular season, 5 forced fumbles. You get to the playoffs in 3-4 games?
Yeah.
3.5 sacks in the playoffs, 1 fumble recovery and 1 fumble force. So it translated directly to the playoffs. It's not like, oh, he gets 4 sacks in a game here and then he disappears for this game. No, it's every single game of the season. This man is attacking the quarterback, and it's just ridiculous. His motor. I think, I didn't use the word motor throughout that whole explanation, but that's what it is. His motor is untouchable, and that's what you got to love about Hassan Reddick, man. He gets after it. So, I agree with you. He's the most important. He's the best.
He's an absolute game wrecker.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I can use to describe him, man. Like, there is no off button for this dude. And you mentioned it in the biggest moments he came up clutch. Obviously, the whole controversy with San Francisco is because of Hassan Reddick and what he was able to do on the very first drive from scrimmage, right? He's unbelievable, dude. He, to me, on the defensive side of the ball is what A.J. Brown is on the offensive side of the ball. And you started to mention that even if he's not getting to the quarterback, his mere presence, like that's why we had A.J. Brown on the top of our list instead of like a Devontae Smith. It's no disrespect to Devontae Smith, but A.J. Brown, even if he has 3 catches for 26 yards, is so valuable because all your attention goes to him. Well, there's going to be games where Hassan Reddick doesn't get a sack, but he's so valuable because they have to spend all that attention towards him. And you do that, and then, there goes Nolan Smith around the other edge.